Hello everyone, myself Rishabh A. Today I and my teammates are going to present on a topic radio telescope. I will give a brief introduction of the topic. Atharva J will talk about objective principle and where it works. Shridhar N will talk about advantages, disadvantages and uses. And Saiamod S will talk about producing images, gathering data, telescope array and largest in the world. So let's start with the introduction. What is a radio telescope? When astronomers first looked at the stars and began to ask questions about what their observations meant, we only really had one tool in their arsenal, the optical telescope. These kinds of telescopes use lenses or mirrors to gather visible light from the above and create a magnified image. But the electromagnetic spectrum contains a lot more than visible light. Once we realized that there was more than our eyes could see, that there were radio waves, microwaves, infrared, ultraviolet, X-rays and gamma rays. We started to look for the ways to view the night sky in these parts of the electromagnetic spectrum. Radio telescopes were one of the first successes in that area. A radio telescope is similar to the radio in your car but is much bigger. Radio telescopes look very like gigantic satellite dishes because radio waves have such long wavelengths that surfaces don't even need to be fully solid. A wire mesh will suffice. Because the waves are too big to fit through gaps, radio telescopes also have to avoid interference and so tend to be placed away from the city, hidden away in valleys to block radio signals from the earth. Why was radio telescope invented? The radio telescope has come a long way from its humble origins back in 1931. The first attempt was designed by an amateur physicist named Carl Jansky, who all but stumbled upon the discovery of a radio antenna as something to be used for space research. What is a radio telescope made of? Radio telescope is an astronomical instrument consisting of a radio receiver and an antenna system that is used to detect radio frequency radiation emitted by extraterrestrial sources. Radio telescopes vary widely but they all have two basic components, a large radio antenna and a radio meter or radio receiver.
What is the principle of radio telescope? It works. Two radio telescope observe the same radio source. The telescope are a no distant apart on the ground. The radio waves coming from the source will therefore arrive at one telescope at a slightly different time than the other. Where do radio telescope work best? The coldest, driest, most remote place on Earth is the best place to build a radio telescope. Objective: we use radio telescopes to study naturally occurring radio light from stars, galaxies, black holes, and other astronomical objects. In fact, we do not usually refer to radio light by its wavelength but by its frequency. Naturally occurring radio waves are extremely weak by the time they reach us from space.
What are uses of radio telescope? Radio telescopes are used to measure broad bandwidth, continuum radiation as well as narrow bandwidth. Spectroscopy features due to atomic and molecular lines found in the radio spectrum of astronomical objects. What are the advantages of a radio telescope? The advantages of radio telescope is that they can be used in cloud weather since radio waves can pass through clouds. The disadvantages of these instruments is that they need a large collecting area, which means that they are expensive to construct. Telescopes are instruments that can magnify electromagnetic radiation.
How does a radio telescope produce images? A radio telescope scans across an object and receives radio waves from each little spot in space around that object. Some spots may have stronger radio waves coming from them than others. Then the computer replaces the numbers with colors and a picture of the radio source results. How do radio telescopes gather the data? How does a radio telescope actually gather data? The radio telescope focuses the incoming radio waves on an antenna, which absorbs and transmits these waves to an amplifier, just like a radio antenna. Space telescopes orbit above the Earth's atmosphere and thus produce clearer images than Earth-based telescopes. What is a telescope array? An array is a group of several radio antennas observing together, creating in effect a single telescope many miles across. As a first step, N and Rao built the Greenback interferometer to learn and develop the best communications, correlation, and atmospheric correction practices. What's the largest and the biggest radio telescope in the entirety of the world? According to the paper published in Nature today, between August and October 2019, the FAST 500-meter aperture spherical radio telescope in southwestern China recorded a total of 1,652 such short, brief, and bright outbursts from a single repeating FRB source in a dwarf galaxy approximately 3 billion light years away. Thank you.